Alright, so I'm just about to start a job that I really dislike and I know I'm going to regret, because every time I do this, it takes a long time, I always get something wrong and I always end up breaking something. What I'm about to do is rewire my entire studio. And at this point I'm really asking myself, why am I doing this? And the answer is, it kind of needs to be done. The studio as it is has been like this for a few years now, and I haven't actually had a cable refresh in probably 4 or 5 years. Which is fine, but I'm at a point now where I just want to improve everything and make everything a little bit better. So the time came for me to make the decision that I really need to freshen everything up. And in this video, I want to talk to you about the process of doing that. And the most important thing is, why should you buy really good high-end cables? Now, before you reach for the back button or skip to another video, I promise you this will be a lot more exciting than it sounds. I'm not going to make you watch me plug in all new cables. I just want to talk to you about the thought process behind why I'm rewiring and what advantages having high-end cables can actually bring to your setup. Now, when it comes to cables, the big question is always, how much money should I spend on cables? And honestly, there is not a right answer for this. It all depends on your own circumstances, your own needs, your budgets, how many cables you need, how long you need those cables to be. There's a ton of different reasons. And the other big question people ask is, am I going to hear a difference? And to be brutally honest, the short answer is no. Most people will never be able to tell the difference between a £10 XLR cable and a £300 XLR cable. There are hundreds, thousands of people out there who cannot tell the difference between these cable pricings, and I'm one of them. I probably could not tell you a difference between an £8 cable or a £10 cable versus an £80 cable or a £100 cable if you played me audio samples through them. But there are some advantages to using high quality cable, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about what those advantages are. But first of all, I want to say a big thank you to the guys at Sommer Cable. I met the guys at Sommer Cable at 42 Gear Street this year, and they very kindly helped me out by basically providing me all the cable I need for this video. So at the start of the video, you saw me lugging in this huge box, and this is full of all of the cables that I'm going to be using in this video. Now, I've got 3 main types of cable in this box, and we're going to talk about what I've got in the box, why I've got them in the box, and then I'm going to start explaining to you the actual benefits of using high-end cable. So I've got things in this box that are quite obvious, like jack-to-jack cables. I use these for plugging my guitar in, for running connections from my pedal board on my desk to the different amps around the room, for patching in different pieces of gear. Like I've got a spring reverb tank up here that gets patched in and out with different things. So having good quality jack-to-jack cables is very, very useful for me. I've also got XLR cables. Now these particular ones are actually short 1.5 meter cables. Now for, live use, you're not going to need a cable this short. What I actually use these for is from the back of my desk, which you currently can't see, to behind these amps, I actually have a multi-core running. And the actual cable tails on the multi-core are not long enough to reach everything I want them to reach. So these are actually going to be used as extenders, where I can actually extend the things on the multi-core to all the different pieces of gear. I'm going to be using a few of these on my desk for some extensions, and most of them are going to go behind this wall of amps. I've also got some XLR cables which run to a 1/4 inch jack. So they're male XLR to 1/4 inch jack. Now the reason for this is my audio interface, which is an Audient Evo 16, doesn't have XLR ins for studio monitors. It has 1/4 inch jack inputs. So these are going to connect to my monitors with the XLR and to my interface with the jack. Now I've actually got quite a lot of these cables. I've got 2 of these blue ones, and I've actually got 6 of the same cable in green as well. Now, the reason I've got so many of them, even though I've only got 2 sets of studio monitors currently, is I'm actually awaiting delivery of a studio monitor switcher, and that actually has jack inputs on the back as well. So I'm actually going to be doing a video in the near future combining all my monitors into a single switching unit as well. So you'll see those cables in action again at some point. I've got more jack-to-jack cables with angled end. That's always useful. whether that's for studio use or maybe some of these will end up coming on the road with me. Sommer Cable have sent me a couple of their different types of 1/4" jack cables. And I've got these ones which are really cool. These are like 10-meter ones, which have this kind of plasticky coating. These actually feel really durable. These actually might end up becoming my touring cables. And also, in amongst the box, I have some longer XLR cables as well. So I use XLR cables for things like the microphone above my desk that's currently recording my voice, to connect to things like the 2 Notes Torpedo Captor X. That's got an XLR output on the back. My Helix has an XLR output. My Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit has an XLR output. If I don't patch these things in with the multi-core that I have, I can actually run individual cables. But also, these are always useful for things like miking amps. If I choose to mic an amp in the studio or plug a microphone in to record an acoustic instrument, things like that are essential. So yeah, I've not gone crazy with my cable types here. We've basically got XLRs of different lengths, jack to jacks of different lengths, and XLR to jack. So pretty much everything I need for my own setup. Now, we need to talk about why you would spend any money on a high quality cable. Now, cables come in all different prices. You can pick up super cheap cables, which the chances are most people are using, me included. My studio is currently full of cables like this with molded plastic ends, which is horrific, really, because I should know better. But at the end of the day, we buy cables that are suited to our current situation, whether that's financial or what we actually need. A lot of the cables I have in my studio, I've probably owned for maybe 10 years or more. So realistically, it's probably time I did freshen those up. Now, I think there are 3 main reasons why you would spend money on good quality cables. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, tone is certainly not one of them. Now, one of these benefits, as it were, can have a slight impact on your tone, but it's not going to be, the defining factor in fixing any tonal problems. And that's the first thing we're going to talk about. And that is the capacitance of a cable. So let's take this XLR cable right here, for instance. This is a Sommer cable XLR cable. So this is not a super cheap budget-friendly cable. It's a premium product. Now, all cables, regardless of their price tag, have what is known as capacitance. Now, I'm not going to go too hard on the science here, but basically capacitance is something that exists in all cables. So guitar cables, microphone cables, any cable you have that transmits signal has capacitance. And what this is basically the amount of electrical energy the cable can store. Now, the longer the cable is, the more capacitance that it has. So think of this like a giant resistor. The longer the cable, the harder that energy has to work to go from one side to the other. This is the whole logic behind people saying you should use the shortest cables possible. And when you are using longer cables, you should spend the money on lower capacitance cables. Now, the reason this is important is if the signal has a harder time going from one end to the other, there is going to be some perceived tonal changes. Now, the most common thing you would experience if you had a cable with high capacitance is a treble roll-off. So for instance, if you're using a 30-foot guitar cable, that might sound slightly less bright than perhaps a 10-foot guitar cable, which being shorter and having a lower capacitance, it's going to let through a little bit more of that top-end information. Now, where this is really important with the pricing structures of cables is premium cables are often lower capacitance levels by default. So when you're spending the money on a good cable, you're actually getting a cable that has lower capacitance from the store. So regardless of the length, it's actually going to transmit data that little bit better. Now, if you're just running a single cable, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference. But again, where this is really useful is if you're running multiple cables, like I am. I've got cables running all over my studio. So the signal chain from, let's say, my guitar to an amp through some pedals into my interface sometimes could be 60 foot of cable, even though I'm in a room this size. So I really need cables that are the absolute lowest in capacitance, because what I want to hear in the room is what I want to translate to the videos I make. And if I'm using cables that are taking all the high end or taking all the low end out of my sound, in the room it might sound okay, but what you're then hearing is a very different thing. And for me as a content creator, that's not a good thing. I want what I hear in the room to translate to what you guys hear in the audio. So making sure your tone is intact and you get the truest representation of what you're recording and what you're capturing is a definite good reason to buy a high quality, low capacitance cable. So the second really important reason why you should spend some money on good cables is shielding and noise interference. Now I'm going to be taking this short XLR and a bunch more and plugging them into my multi-core, which is behind my amp wall. Now, in my setup, because I record a lot of guitar, I use a lot of different amps, and I have lights in the studio, this is kind of a hotbed for RF noise and all kinds of different interference. Now, if you take a look behind here, what you're going to see is a lot of different cables, power, lights, all sorts of stuff stacked up on top of each other. And this is actually a real problem spot. Now, I have personally had experiences with noise in the studio because, like I said, a lot of my cables are old and I need to freshen them up. So inside a cable, you have a core. The core of the cable is what transmits the data from one end to the other. And around that core is a shield. And this is very important. High-end cables are always really well shielded and they protect against outside interference from things like those big lights. Those are a nightmare for interference. Color changing lights can also be a pain. Power supplies can be a pain. My PC, that is a real pain for noise. I get all kinds of RF noise off my PC because I'm not using cables with great shielding. And now I'm going to be upgrading this myself. This is another reason you should definitely do that, because if you do have a place like this with a lot of cables in close proximity to things like lights and power, the shielding on your cables is absolutely vital to make sure you don't capture any of that noise in what you're recording. Cables that are cheaper are often poorly shielded or sometimes even not shielded at all. So if you're using a cheap cable, don't be surprised if you do get some hum or some RF noise from things. It's not uncommon. As a general rule of thumb, the more you spend on a cable, the better it's going to be shielded. So I'm not saying go out and spend £300 on a single cable, but as a general rule, if you're having noise issues, this is always a good place to start. Check your cables, try out some good quality cables if you can, and it'll probably fix the issue. And the third reason why using good quality cables is very important is wear and tear, the lifespan of a cable. Now, for this, I'm going to be talking about this particular jack cable because in my situation, I use a lot of jack-to-jack cables. So in my daily life, I'm taking jack cables and plugging them constantly in and out of amps. Whether I'm changing amps, changing guitars, pedals, whatever it is, these cables are vital. I'm always moving cables in and out of different pieces of gear. So it might get plugged into one amp for part of a video, out into another amp for a different part of the video, out. So these things are getting a lot of moving time in my studio. And, you know, subsequently, it's gonna wear out after a while. Jack cables fail all the time. You know yourself, if you're a gigging musician and you step on one the wrong way, that's the end of your gig, your cable's gone. So having good quality cables will improve the lifespan of the cable as well. Now, with good quality guitar cables, there's also a bit of a double-edged sword here because they also have better capacitance, which means you get a clearer tone, and the shielding is better. So if you're playing higher gain stuff, once again, you get less interference. Like, especially in my case, sometimes when I play with higher gain stuff, my PC tower down there plays absolute hell with my pickups. So again, great quality cables will kind of solve that issue for me as well. So it's improving the life cycle, it's cleaning up my tone by getting rid of noise, and it's lowering the capacitance. But also, in my case, I also have cables that are run, for instance, like from my pedal board here on my desk, I have cables that run all the way along underneath my guitar rack to the amps at the back, and the other way they run behind the storage unit down the back here. So the cables are kind of getting pulled places. Again, I need them to be durable because the last thing I want to do is pull the cable and have it break. So good cables will also improve the lifespan because often they're built better, and when a cable is built better, it tends to last that little bit longer. But yeah, like I said, those are my three reasons why I think upgrading cables is useful. I'd love to know your experience with this. Let me know what cables you guys are using, and you know, if you've experienced any of these problems, let me know, because I'd love to know what issues you guys are having in your own setups and if it's something that can be solved with a cable upgrade. Let me know down below in the comments. And once again, a big, huge thank you to the guys at Sommer Cable for hooking me up with this box of cables. Thank you guys for making this video possible and supporting the channel in this way. These cables are going to be a really, really welcome upgrade. My cables are very tired and they need to be retired. So thank you guys for coming on board and helping me make this video possible. Like I said to all you guys out there, let me know if you've run into any of these problems down below. There are some links in the description to the Sommer Cable website, so please check out some of their stuff as well. They make some amazing cables. If they don't have it on their website, they can probably build it as well. They've got a huge array of cables, not just things like XLRs and jack cables. They do power cables, audio-video cables. If you name it, they probably make it. So please check their website out for all your cable needs as well. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button as well. Thank you guys so much for watching as always. I'll see you very soon.